Okay, thank you for joining us. Tuesday, December 21st, Fridley School Board meeting, and we'd like to start with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we will start tonight with approval of agenda with suggested motions and resolutions. Is there a motion to accept the minutes and get started on our agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Meisner, seconded by Stark to approve the agenda for December 21st. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. And we will start with Employee of the Month. Dr. Heil.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Perito and board members. This evening, I am proud to announce the Fridley Public Schools Employee of the Month for December of 2021, and it is Geeta Anderson. So congratulations to our Fridley December 2020 Employee of the Month, Bridgetta Anderson. Anderson serves as a classroom assistant at Fridley Preschool. In her role, she supports Liz Swetzer's preschool scholars in all aspects of learning throughout the day. She helps to prepare materials, assists with assessments, engages in play with students, leads art projects, and oversees and ensures student safety during arrival and dismissal hours. According to the Principal of Alternative Services, Kelly McConville, Anderson's abilities and genuine care for students is second to none. Geeta is constantly going above and beyond to find ways to bring joy and creativity to the classroom and the entire FCC. The PYP coordinator, Karen Beckstrand, added that Anderson displays all aspects of the IB learner profile. She's caring, knowledgeable, and open-minded, said Beckstrand. She builds and nurtures relationships with students, staff, and families, and has a willingness to do whatever is needed. In addition to supporting preschool students, Anderson is also looking for ways to create building-wide community among staff members. She is an incredible staff member. We are fortunate to have her on our team, said McConville. Congratulations to Bridgetta on a well-deserved honor of District Employee of the Month for December of 2021.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And tonight we are honoring and saying goodbye to board member Carol Thornton, who's retiring from the school board. Carol has served as a member of the Fridley School Board since 2016, when she was first appointed by the school board to fill a one-year vacancy. As a parent of a Fridley student, Carol supported Fridley schools throughout active volunteerism at Stevenson Elementary School. She won her re-election bid in 2017, becoming the first African American to be elected to the Fridley School Board. A mental health case manager, Carol brought a lens and understanding of the impact of mental health and social emotional wellness on students. During her tenure on the board, Carol has served as director, treasurer, and clerk, and served as board representative on labor union negotiations for the district. She was a Fridley School Board representative at the Schools for Equity in Education, SEE, an organization that advocates for equity in school funding. In 2019, she was elected president of SEE, their executive board, and has served a 2-year term. Carol, thank you for your service on the school board and your unwavering support of the students, staff, family, and community of Fridley Public Schools. We wish you the best as you move on to new adventures. Thank you, and we have just a little parting gift and
Thank
cupcakes
you so much.
after.
Oh, thank you so very much.
So
I'm
we just
so
want to
honored.
thank
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you so much.
Yep, Carol.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate this.
And next month, you will see our newest board member. So we look forward to Nikki joining us next month. We will move on to superintendent and staff reports with our audit presentation from Ms. Raisler.
Board Chair Pruito, board members, and Superintendent Dr. Heil. We have from Bergen KDV our lead auditor, Janelle Bitson, to talk about the audit for Fridley Public Schools for fiscal year 2021.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to be here to present with you tonight. We do issue 4 reports as part of our audit process, so I wanted to cover the results of those reports with you. The first one being the independent auditor's report. Again, this report does state that the financial statements are management's responsibility, and our responsibility is to express an opinion based on the results of our audit. We once again did issue an unmodified opinion. This is what's considered a clean opinion or the best opinion that we can offer you on your financial statements. The second report we issue is a report in accordance with government auditing standards. These standards, again, require us to report on the internal controls over financial reporting as well as compliance with various laws, regulations, grants, and agreements. We did have one internal control finding to report, and that, again, is the lack of segregation of accounting duties. Due to the limited staff that you have within your finance office, there are some duties that are kind of overlapping each other. We do feel that there are mitigating controls in place so that we can report that as a mid-level finding. Again, there are 3 levels of findings, and we report that as that middle level. And then when it comes to non-compliance, we had no items of non-compliance to report to the board. The next report we issue is our report in accordance with uniform guidance. And this relates to the federal funding that the district receives. We do have to test compliance on the major programs for the year. And this year we tested the coronavirus relief funds, education stabilization funds, and special education funds. And we did issue an unmodified opinion on the compliance with these programs. And then the last report we issue is our report on Minnesota legal compliance. The state auditor's office gives us a list of state statutes to test compliance with each year. And we had no items of non-compliance, so another clean report for the district. And then moving on, we have some general fund budget to actual information to you. Again, the amended budgeted numbers called for revenues of $47.2 million, expenditures of $47.3 million, net other financing sources and uses of $291,000. So an overall decrease in fund balance of $343,000. When looking at the actual numbers, revenues came in at about $47.1 million, so about $151,000 under budget. Actual expenditures were at about $44.7 million or $2.6 million under budget. And again, the largest reason for that variance on the expenditures was items attributed to COVID and distance learning and some kind of changes that were made during the year. And then you did have net other financing uses of $277,000, which was about $13,000 over budget. So overall, your fund balance increased about $2.1 million. A large portion of that increase is in the restricted fund balance, and we'll look at that in one of the tables following, showing where your fund balance levels are at. Again, this next table shows the general education formula allowance for the last 10 years and for the current year. So it does show that you are getting some increases in the formula allowance each year. And as we discussed earlier, it's oftentimes not enough to cover the increases in your expenditures that you're receiving. So the funding doesn't always keep up with the costs. Next, we have the average daily membership numbers. This is the resident ADM numbers that we're looking at here. 2018 was the high point presented in the 5 years here. And then since then, you've been seeing decreases in your resident numbers. down about 58 ADMs or 2.4% for 2021. And again, just a reminder that the ADM numbers does factor in the number of students that you have as well as the days that they are enrolled in your district. So that's where that calculations come from. And then those ADM numbers are converted to pupil unit numbers. Based on the grade levels, there's different weighting factors, different aids paid based on those grade levels. So overall, your pupil units served numbers have decreased in 2021, and that's a result of a decrease in the resident pupil unit numbers and an increase in the residents leaving the district. And then this graph just shows your total pupil unit numbers kind of broken out between the residents and the non-residents coming in. And then this graph shows the change that you've had in your resident ADM numbers and the pupil units served for the last 5 years. Again, in 2017 and 2018, you did have some increases in your enrollment and then some decreases in the years since then. Looking at the general fund sources of revenue, overall your revenues increased about $2.7 million for 2021. You did have some increase in the property tax with the increase in the levy and the referendum dollars received. But the largest component of that revenue increase did come from the other category, and that was attributed to the federal funding received, specifically to the COVID grants, the ESSER, the GEARS money, and the coronavirus relief dollars. And then the pie charts here, again, just show the allocation of expenditures for the general fund. Looking at the instructional categories, the regular, vocational, and special education, that makes up about 60% of your total general fund dollars. And when you look at the comparisons, the allocations from 2021 compared to 2020, overall very consistent where you're spending your dollars within the district. The next table shows the overall general fund operations for the year, or the last 5 years. For 2021, you did have an increase in revenues of about 6.1%, an increase in expenditures of about 5.5%. So overall, revenues exceeded expenditures by about $2.4 million. And then you did have some other items that were factored into that, sale of capital assets, proceeds from capital leases, and some transfers out. So overall, an increase in your fund balance of about $2.1 million. So at the end of the year, your fund balance was about $9.5 million. And then the bottom part of the table here breaks out those different components of fund balance. A large portion of your fund balances are restricted for specific purposes. Those restrictions are state mandated. And so the long-term facilities maintenance, that's where the largest component of your increase in fund balance went specifically to that restriction itself. You also saw some increases in the medical assistance restriction and assigned fund balance as well. And then the next table here is the food service fund. Overall revenues and expenditures in this fund did decrease for the 2021. Much of that was attributed to COVID and distance learning and an overall reduction in the meals served. You did have revenues in excess of expenditures of about $13,000, so an overall increase in your fund balance. And then we do again have a chart in here that just shows the lunches served to students for the last 5 years. And that number has been decreasing. Some of that was attributed to the decrease in enrollment, but the last 2 years are really attributed to COVID and distance learning and the limitations that you've had with those programs. And then the last table I have for you tonight is the Community Service Fund. And this fund again had decreases in revenues and expenditures due to COVID and limitations on some of the programs that could be offered. A lot of these programs didn't start until February, March during the year, and then even then, some of the families were slow to come back to some of the programs, so participation was down compared to prior years. So you did have an overall expenditures in excess of revenues of about $566,000. You did transfer some dollars in relating to levy dollars from the general fund, but overall a decrease in your fund balance. This is the second year of the 5 years presented that you did have a decrease in fund balance. And so at the end of 2021, the fund in total had a deficit fund balance, and when you look at the different components of that at the bottom of the page there, the community education program specifically is kind of where that deficit is coming from. And again, much of that is related to the limitations because of the COVID pandemic. So that's what I have for you tonight, kind of a quick summary. Certainly open to any questions if any of you might have questions.
Thank you so much. I think that was very well put together. We appreciate it. Does anyone have any questions? No? Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Okay, and again, thank you for the opportunity to work with the district, and thank you to Barbie and her staff in the finance department. They really do put a lot of work into preparing for the audit, and we appreciate all the work that they do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Ms. Reisler, you can come back up and we'll do truth in taxation.
Okay, thank you again, Board Chair Perito, board members, and Superintendent Dr. Heil. As part of legislation, we do need to have a public presentation regarding our truth in taxation. So I will just take you through that information that we have put together. So the Minnesota state law does require that we have a truth in taxation meeting to be held after 6 p.m. from the dates of November 25th to December 28th this particular calendar year. And it can be part of a regular board meeting, so that's what we are doing. At the end of the presentation, I will be taking questions, and then later on in the meeting, I'll be asking you to adopt the final levy at that time. So we'll just discuss some of the background, our district's budget, the taxes payable for 2022, and then if anyone has a comment or questions. This slide simply talks about the legislature that they provide for public school funding. What it's basically saying is that we have a lot of regulations that are part of that funding. Some of it is taxing on schools, some of it is aid provided to school districts. The state authorizes school boards to submit referendums for operating and capital needs to voters for approval, and as you know, we have both of those at this time. We do have an operating referendum, and that is currently about $512 per pupil, and then we also have a capital project levy that was approved by the voters in 2020. So talking about some of the challenges that the state has for setting the basic general education formula. As we know, for fiscal year 22, the legislature did approve a 2.45% increase to that basic formula, and then for next fiscal year, that amount will be 2%. Unfortunately, this lacks in inflation. And so since 2002, 2003, the state has not kept pace with inflation. If they had, at the end of fiscal year 23, our per pupil amount would actually be $598 greater than what it is currently. That's an 8.7% increase. And so that's quite a hurdle to overcome. This graph just simply shows if the state had kept pace with inflation versus where we are and how that gap continues to grow. Some of the causes for the expenditures to exceed revenues in some districts and the need for operating referendums or capital project levies does have to do with funding special education, and as those costs continue to rise and the subsequent revenue source for those does not, it just becomes increasingly harder to balance the budget, and then we do need to go out to our voters. It's important to remember that a change in the tax levy does not determine a change in the budget. It can, but it's not always a one-for-one. The third bullet there talks about how expenditure budget is limited by state set revenue formula, voter approved levies, and then whatever fund balance we have. This slide simply shows the difference between how a city-county operates versus how a school district operates, and that we have different fiscal years, and that provides some challenges at times when trying to keep track of which year you're in, which year you collect the dollars, which year you actually recognize the dollars, and so that's what this slide is supposed to represent. We'll be looking at some of our budget information then. So this is a budget publication that by statute does have to be in our newspaper, as well as we decide to put it on our website. And so this has already been published for the current fiscal year. This just provides data then on the FY21 budget, where we ended up after the audit, and then the FY22 budget that you approved prior to July 1st. Here we have some pie charts that show the revenues and how those are made up. Obviously, the majority of our revenues is in our general fund. That makes up about 81% of our total revenues. Specifically then within the general fund revenue, the state portion of it, the state aid portion of it, is about 78%. So our federal is about 3%, and then the local, so that would be, anything like registrations and fees and those different kinds of things, property taxes, that is coming in at 19%. We also then have data specific to our expenditures, and we saw some of that data just reported by Janelle, so I won't go into detail with that. We also, though, break it down not only by program, but then by object. And so it's easy to see that the vast majority of our expenditure budget is based on salaries and benefits. So that makes up about 74%. The other larger portion then is our purchase services. And so that would be like our contractors, attorneys, and those different types of expenses. And that's coming in at 17%. Getting to the heart then of the Pay 22 property tax levy. So this just talks about the property tax background. It's important to remember that when we're talking about property taxes, we're talking about all of the jurisdictions. So we're talking county, city, township, school district, special districts, all of those kinds of things. What we need to report on is simply the school district's portion of that. This is just an example of what a proposed taxes statement looks like for calendar year 2022. There we go. It's important to, well, it's not important. It's interesting to note there are 40 different categories for a school district. So there's many, many categories in which we have a tax levy for, and so each one is very different, and so it does get to be somewhat cumbersome when trying to explain how they all work and what they all mean. So we'll just, the property tax background is just kind of laid out for you here in a set of steps. There are 7 steps. So there's the city and county that determines the estimated market value. So the school district has nothing to do with estimating property market value. That is strictly done by the city or county. The legislature then sets the formulas. The county auditor calculates the tax capacity. Legislature again sets formulas based on the data that they have. The Department of Education also helps to detail what are some of the limits. The only step that the school board has a part in is accepting or setting what they want for a levy limit. So that's the piece where the school board has a say in the process. The county auditor then takes all of that data and divvies it up so that each taxpayer then knows how much they are liable for, if you will. This just talks about what that timeline looks like. So back in September, the school board did approve the maximum amount to the levy, and so tonight then we'll actually set the specific dollar amount. For Fridley Public Schools, our proposed tax levy has increased by 3.7%. And we'll just go through a few of those reasons. This is just a table showing you how that 3.7% was derived based on the fund. And so we have our general fund, which increased by 5.4. Our community service fund actually went down by 10.8%. And then our debt service was 1.9, increase for an overall increase of 3.7%. So the explanation of the levies, so we did have a general fund increase for capital project referendum, and that was because of the 2020 vote that we did. So that's for taxes payable in 2021. So our that actually came into play in 2022 because we went out a year early. So that's coming in 2022, and that provides a portion of the increase. Prior year adjustments, and again, what prior year adjustments are, most of the levy data is based on projections and assumptions. Once the final data is brought to light and recognized, then prior year adjustments are done to kind of even everything up. And so what can be adjusted are things like enrollment, property values, and expenditures for future years. We also had a reduction for debt excess. We defeased a bond, and so we refinanced. And so we have an excess then in our debt excess, if you will. And again, what that means is that we have to pay, we have to collect 105% versus what the actual amount is in case of delinquencies. Very seldom are there any delinquencies, and thus you'll see a buildup then of that debt excess. So factors impacting individual taxpayers' school taxes, again, it's their individual property tax value, because even though the trend might be in one direction, one individual's property tax could increase more or decrease, dependent on what their value has been assessed at. The next few slides just give some comparison of what the taxes look like for the last 4 years based on data that our financial firm Ellers put together for us. So this just gives an example of different types of property, residentials, commercial, and apartments, and what has transpired over the last 4 years. Again, Ellers has assumed a 16.3% increase in cumulative changes in property value, because Fridley's property has certainly increased quite well in the last few years. So this just gives examples of residential homes valued at $200,000 and $300,000 over the last 4 years, and then commercial, industrial property, as well as apartments. The last few slides just talks about different ways that our taxpayers can get a credit refund. We still have the circuit breaker, it was called back in the 70s. And again, it's based on annual income, based on the value of the home, and then there is a sliding scale for refunds. This one is often forgot by homeowners because the actual application date is done in August, and so it's not close to our normal when we do our taxes, if you will, when we apply for our tax refund or pay in. There is also a special property tax refund that doesn't hit very often. It's when there is usually a referendum, and it's recognized the first year after a referendum is done if your taxes increase by over $100 in the year, or 12%. And then we also have the senior citizens property tax deferral. That's important for folks to remember that are maybe on a fixed income. So the next steps that we'll be asking for tonight is for the board to accept any public comments if we have any, and then later on we'll be asking for approval of the property tax.
Wonderful. We will now move on to business action items, and Ms. Reisler, you can stay. We're going to accept the audit report.
Yes, and so I ask that the board accept the audit report as presented for the fiscal year 21 school year, for fiscal year 2021.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
And second.
Motion by Stark, seconded by Meisner to approve the 2021 audit report. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That motion passes. Next, we are also going to ask for a motion to accept the tax levy final certification of the Pay 22 levy.
Yep, so I'm asking for the board to approve and certify the final property tax levy for taxes payable 2022 in the amount of $12,763,464.80.
And is there a motion to accept?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Meisner, seconded by Stark to approve the tax levy final certification of Pay 22 levy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. And another one, we're going to look at approving the Fridley High Boiler purchase for going out for bids, a request for bids.
Correct. So Brian Brown, the Director of Buildings and Grounds, and I are requesting that the school board approve for us to be able to advertise for bids for an upcoming boiler project. Again, this will be at the high school. Part of the project will include converting our boiler system from steam to condensing hot water, and we will need to purchase 3 boilers. Because of that purchase and because of the dollar amount of the project, it exceeds $170,000, which is the threshold which mandates the need for sealed bids and advertising for those bids. And so we request to be able to advertise the specifications in our official newspaper. The plan is to have those bids provided by January 13th, 2022 at 10 a.m. And they will be opened here at the Fridley Community Center. We are anticipating that the project will be done then in August of 2022. And just as a note, if the bids are received and are not conducive to our needs or our budget estimate, we do have the right to reject those bids and go out again.
Wonderful. And is there a motion to accept the boiler purchase project?
Motion to accept.
Second.
So we have a motion by Carnop, seconded by Thornton to approve the Fridley High School boiler purchase project. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you so much. Next, we are going to accept gifts. So our resolution, whereas School Board Policy 706 establishes guidelines for the acceptance of gifts to the district, whereas Minnesota Statute 465.03 states the school board may accept a gift, grant, or device of real or personal property only by the adoption of a resolution approved by 2/3 of its members. Therefore, be it resolved, the School Board of Fridley Public Schools accepts with appreciation the following gifts received by the school district. The following persons donated to Stevenson Elementary: St. Philip's Lutheran Church, handmade mittens and hats. Christopher Breitbach, $72.10. The following persons donated to Fridley Middle School: Jennifer Schneider, $250 for prizes at the Tiger Grit Store. And the following persons donated to the high school for a total of $1,316. Highway Credit Union Foundation to help fund the school store experience project, Gibbs family, and Target Corporation Employees Giving Campaign. Is there a motion to accept the gifts and thank the donors?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Thornton, seconded by Carnop to accept the gifts and thank the donors for their contributions. And because that is a resolution, I will call the roll. Mr. Carnop?
Aye.
Mr. Meisner?
Aye.
Ms. Perwito is an aye. Ms. Thornton?
Aye.
You're not on here. Ms. Stark? Aye. And the motion passes. We can't always be perfect, I guess. Okay. Miss McLemore, please come on down. You are going to talk to us about second readings and adoption of policies.
Yes, thank you, Board Chair Provito, board members, and Superintendent Dr. Heil. First policy is 519, interviews of students by outside agencies. This policy sets procedure and guidelines for outside agencies to interview our students. And while this may not occur regularly in the district, the board has established and adopted this policy to provide parameters for which this can happen when it is needed. No additional changes have been made since it was presented to you for first reading at the last board meeting. The second policy is 520, student surveys, and this policy provides guidelines that schools and districts use when approving and conducting student surveys. These surveys could be internal, meaning they are school-based, or they are being conducted by the school district, or they can be administered in collaboration with other educational partners, for example, the Minnesota Department of Education. There are no further changes since this was also presented to you for first reading. And tonight we are going to be asking for your approval of these two policies.
Wonderful, thank you. I would like to also, Ms. McLemore, stay. Thank you so much. For those of you who haven't heard, Ms. Giles is going to be leaving us. So we just want to thank you so much for all you've done with communications and for the community, for Fridley, for all the schools. You have just been a wonderful asset, and we are deeply, deeply going to miss you. So we thank you for your time and your service and wish you the best.
Thank you.
We're sad.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Somebody else is
greatly,
lucky.
you will be greatly missed, Jael, for all of your hard work through
Thank
the
you.
years.
I
your
appreciate that.
support.
And if I can just add that, over the last, I've been in the district for 10 years, and I'm looking at every single board member here, and I had an opportunity to welcome you to the district. So we have had an amazing ride, and your support when we have asked for it has been really appreciated on behalf of our students. Board Chair Provito and Board Member Thornton, we have gone to the state capitol, we've talked to legislators, we met them, we advocated for school funding. Board Member Meisner, Board Member Stark, Board Member Carnop, and Board Member Adam, who is not here today. You have answered the call when we needed you to support referendums, and you have chaired committees that helped us move the work forward. So again, I am deeply grateful for the support that you have given us over the years, because that's what it takes, everyone working together to make sure that our students and our schools get what they need. So I will also miss you, but I have a good feeling because this is a very strong school district with very strong leadership. The work is going to continue. And I'll be checking in every now and then.
And you will be
So,
greatly missed, Jael.
Jael, I had wanted you to stay. You jumped in before I could say anything. But so I just wanted to say thanks to you, Jael, for your incredible 10 years of service here in Fridley. And you've done many things, from helping to pass many successful referendums to creating many publications, many award-winning publications, helping to provide timely and informative information and communication to the Fridley stakeholders. You've created this incredible team with David Weber and Sarah Burkhart, where you guys work so seamlessly together to put out excellent communication. And I just wanted to say you are a valuable member, and one thing I've learned, this is my 4th year, once you've been a Fridleyite, you're always a Fridleyite, so that you're a valuable member of the Fridley community, and you'll be horribly missed. So thank you for your service to Fridley.
Thank you, Dr. Heil.
welcome.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And along with that, we will, I will accept a motion to approve Giles' final push for a second reading and adoption of policies, 519 and 520. Is there a motion?
So moved.
What if no one seconds? Does she have to stay?
Somebody
Do I have
She
to?
can't
Does she
leave.
have to stay?
We're zoning out here.
And
I'll
Meisner.
Second.
Thank you so much. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. We are going to move on to our consent agenda. So I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda of routine action items, including our minutes of the school board meeting and work session that were held on November 16th, 2021. a closed session and special session held on December 7th, 2021, monthly financial reports, new contracts, amendments, lane changes, leaves of absence, terminations, resignations, and retirements, and the Indian Education Parent Committee resolution, also the joint powers agreement with Northeast Metro 916. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Meisner, seconded by Thornton to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next, Miss Laura Seifert Hertling to talk about policy 506 on student discipline.
Thank you, Board Chair Perito, Board Member Superintendent Heil. Tonight I have a first reading of the student discipline policy. This is a policy that we already did look at earlier this year, but we wanted to take a look at it again just so we are looking at the practices we're using in our schools matching our policies. Some of the things, changes that were made were we added a definition for alternatives to suspension because we are working on getting our ATS program up and going. And we also did some combining of some of the code of conduct. So there were some things on there that fell right into our weapons policy, which we also just revisited. So we struck some of those and cleaned that language up a little bit. There were a few changes that we talked about in the meeting right before this that we will certainly change for the second reading. But overall, we just really wanted to make sure that our practices that we're using in our schools are matching our policies.
Thank you so much. Questions? No? We'll look forward to the second reading. And Dr. Bodie, if you'd like to come up and talk to us about some other policies.
Good evening, Board Chair Perito, board members, and Superintendent Dr. Heil. Presenting first readings of three different policies, 599, student acceleration. Just a few language changes just to keep consistency in some of the terminology. There was some areas in there where they talked about, or the policy talks about highly capable students or exceptional students, and preferred language would be exceptional learners, so it stays consistent throughout that policy. And then policy 697, the assessment policy, and 698, the district language policy, are similar in the request, in that there's no MSBA model policy for these, and these were generated years ago around IB's requirements for having policies for assessment and language. However, what we've uncovered during our IB self-study this year is that those are really what IB is asking for are procedures around assessment and language, and not necessarily school board policy. So these policies seem to be not needed any longer, and so we'll be asking to remove those two policies from.
Wonderful. Thank you. No questions. We will see you next month. We will move on to our reports from school board members. We have Ms. Thornton to talk about schools for equity in education.
Okay, we met via, well, it was a hybrid Zoom, and some went in person on December the 10th, and we had a couple of speakers there who presented. The first was Carla Nelson, who's the senator on the tax committee chair. Excuse me, she discussed the projected $7.7 billion surplus, and we discussed some of the best ways to spend that projected surplus. Some points that came up was possibly raising pay for substitute teachers, discussed the bus driver shortages, among other things. There's also a decrease in education projected spending due to the decline in enrollment right now. So be aware of that, and also discuss the danger of spending one-time money for ongoing expenses. Our next speaker was Dr. Eric Guthrie, who's the senior state demographer here for Minnesota. And the 2020 census shows increased levels of racial and ethnic diversity now. Also shows a trending in the fertility rate is trending down right now, so people aren't having a lot of babies right now. And also discussed the 2020 census and its impact on the legislative redistricting at this point. And also 2 district members did not return to see this school year, Stillwater and Maple Lake. So those are some of the highlights at this point.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Nobody's having babies except
I know.
a few.
And I look at Ivana.
I know, right? We have some supporters. Okay, our important future school board dates. We have no school for our winter break, December 22nd through January 3rd, 2022. We have the Fridley Public Schools Board Retreat coming up on January 4th, 5 o'clock here at the Fridley Community Center. AMSD board meeting will be January 7th, 7 a.m. at the Cora Education Center. Northeast Metro 916 board meeting will take place January 12th at the Bel Air School District, or Bel Air School. Going into January 17th, no school for Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Fridley Public School Board meeting, our work session will be at 5:30 on January 18th, with our public forum 7 p.m. and our business meeting here at 7:30. We have no school January 28th for planning and evaluation day. And also on January 31st will be staff development and blended learning. And if there's nothing else, we can adjourn with a motion.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion by Thornton, seconded by Stark to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes, and we are adjourned at 8:16. Thank you.